Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Another Big 12 team preview here for you, the Cincinnati Bearcats. Before we do dive in to their outlook for this season, if you have been liking our content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. But diving in to the Bearcats for this upcoming season, obviously looks a little bit different. Jizzle James was dismissed from the team. Dylan Mitchell left for St. John's. So a little bit different looking team. But on the offensive end, Cody, what do you see in this team?
Yeah, I think for strength, I think that it's going to be their transition attack. But first off, I think that's mostly like what Wes Miller's strengths are as a coach and the way he constructs rosters with athleticism. I think they're kind of built to run. They have great athletes at pretty much every position this year too. I think the guard group is definitely better set up in a faster paced setting, and part of it is due to their shooting and some decision making issues. So I think they're better off in a more open setting. And you have mobile bigs and Mustafa Cham and Baba Miller, who I think are going to be tough for traditional bigs to keep up with. They super long strides, or they can also handle. They can be a lob threat, and particularly Mustafa Cham, 7'2" with a good vertical and super lengthy. I think he's going to be great in that area. And there's a potential for more shooting on this roster as well. I think it's mostly on the wings. The backcourt group is pretty rough again. I mean, Day Thomas shot it well last year, but throughout his career, he hasn't really proven to be all that good. Shot 40% on 3.5 attempts per game. I think the year before he was in like the high 20s. So either he really, really improved as a shooter, or he kind of, just kind of had a somewhat of a breakout year, or maybe even an outlier. I'm willing to think his number goes down a little bit more this year. But you have Kirk Kriisa on the perimeter, who's a talented shooter, takes some questionable shots at times, but he's a career 36% shooter. But on the wings is particularly intriguing for me. I think 4-star freshman Sean Abayev, he's known for his ability to create his own shot, like whether that's from pulling up from three or creating his own look in the mid range, which he's going to have the freedom to do in this Wes Miller offense. And you have a guy like Jalen Celestine as well. He's been rock solid in catch and shoot throughout his career. He's going to be pretty limited to, maybe movement shooting at the very most, but he's mostly a corner 3-point shooting guy. And then you bring in Jordi Rodriguez, who's coming in from Spain. He's, from what I've seen, he's known as more just a pure shooter. So if he plays somewhat of a role, I think he can provide value on the offensive end. And then there's some front court floor spacing with Mustafa Cham and Baba Miller. It's intriguing. I don't think it's like high level floor spacing by any means. Like Baba Miller shot it well, shot at 35% on decent volume. Mustafa Cham only shot at 29%, but as a freshman, and he kind of had the green light. I'm not completely sure if he's going to have a 36% upside, but the fact that he's willing to shoot it and knocked it down at a decent clip for a big, I think is encouraging. And there's potentially more floor spacing on this roster than years past.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I guess to kind of flip to the weaknesses of this offense, I do worry about the guard group, particularly in the half court, like taking care of the basketball, shot efficiency. We're looking at, I mean, just to rattle off some numbers here, right? Like Day Thomas is a career 46.2% effective field goal percentage shooter. He's also, a career 19% turnover rate guy. He's now going to have the ball in his hands, a lot more. Jizzle James is gone. Kirk Kriisa, last year, obviously small sample size at Kentucky in 9 games, but 39% effective field goal rate. The year before that at West Virginia was good in 23 games, but he's kind of lived around that like 48, 49, 50% effective field goal percentage. And then, just to like the guard depth in general is not like overly fantastic. And Brant, like looking at a guy coming over from West Virginia and Sincere Harris, not really an offensive guy at all, right? I mean, 6 for 53 from 3 last year.
That's being nice.
41% effective field goal rate. Turns the ball over, doesn't really create offense despite being like a 6'4" guard. So I think for me, it's like these guards and their efficiency, their ability to take care of the basketball. I think it's really going to pose problems against high level defenses in this league. And then, once they get in the half court, I do worry quite a bit about, how they're going to generate offense and generate shots.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it on the head with the weaknesses. A couple things I will note is, you talked about the effective field goal percentage throughout the entire roster, but Wes Miller has only had one team finish inside the top 100 nationally in effective field goal percentage in his coaching career. That's a 13-year sample size. So I think it's just part of the way he constructs rosters, part of the way, like, he doesn't mind his team taking mid-range jump shots. I had the number on the amount of mid-range jumpers they took. I don't have it up, and it's a team that never gets to the free throw line either, despite their athleticism and physicality at pretty much all 5 positions. I think he's just willing to let his guards take mid-range dribble pull-ups, and a lot of his guys. I mean, Jizzle James was a guy that could knock down the mid-range jump shot at a high level. I think Day Thomas can do it as well. Obviously, Jizzle James is out the door, but overall, it's just not an effective shot. It's not an efficient shot over the course of 40 minutes. And I wish Wes Miller would, be a little bit more analytically driven on the offensive end. I think just lets his guys go. And, he added shooting. So obviously it's going to help, but I still don't think they've done enough to, just get him off of like the narrative that he can't build a good offense. I just think it's going to be a lot of the same this year. And like, there are some other pieces down the board. Like, I mean, Keyshawn Tillery, he's another more defensive minded, like bigger guard. I believe he's a 4-star coming in. There's another piece. You have Lucas Atori as well, who's like known as a shooter coming from Brazil. Didn't play very high level of basketball, but he's proven that he can shoot it. So it does seem like Wes Miller's trying to flip the script, trying to add, a different kind of roster. But overall, it just still doesn't seem like enough with his current build, at least in the main rotation.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Now shifting to the defensive side of the ball, I think they do have some guys on this end that are really going to be able to make an impact. Mustafa Cham, obviously last year he was freshman year, most notably 9.1% block rate, but also if you look, he did it in his per 40, 3.8 fouls per 40, right? So pretty solid for a guy that, can really impact shots. Then you got Baba Miller who can disrupt shots as well. 6% block rate last year. And then I think like you have a bunch of guys on the wing on the perimeter that like for all of Sincere Harris's faults on the offensive end, like he is an impactful defender in a lot of ways. 3.1% block rate, right around 4% steal rate. Physical guard at 6'4" that can make and create plays, and then even a guard like Day Thomas, 4.1% steal rate. He's got a career 3.9% steal rate, so a real knack for the basketball on the ball and generating plays. Which, to your point about strengths on the offensive end, their transition attack, I think, like if they're gonna be any good and competitive in the Big 12, like it's going to have to come from their defense generating that offense in transition.
Yeah, I would agree. And it absolutely can happen with this group. I mean, yeah, like you said, whatever Sincere Harris is giving away on the offensive end, he pretty much gets it back defensively. Have to have a 3.1% block rate at 6'4", and you're a smaller guard, you're a 2 guard, and he's just a fantastic playmaker. He can make anything happen out of nothing. So I'm curious to see the kind of role that he gets. Like, does the offense really hold him back from getting any more than 15 minutes a game, which ultimately I think that's where his role should be. You come in and provide a spark for 15 to 20 minutes on the defensive side, and you get out of there and add in some more offensive minded guys. But yeah, this is just another roster that is, built for defense. Wes Miller is always going to tap into this side of the ball. One guy we haven't talked about is Jalen Haynes, who I think is actually a fairly underrated defender. Like when you watch him, he's a wide framed 6'8" forward. He actually has like super long arms. I bet his wingspan's close to 7 foot, 7'1". And there's some shot blocking ability in the tank, and he's a better lateral mover than he looks when you first start watching him. And I think he can really provide some value either at the 4 or the 5. He's a good defensive rebounder, and I think that's potentially another strength of this group. I know Cham and Miller are a little bit like slim framed and might struggle on the glass consistently with here, but overall, I don't really think there's many weak points defensively on this roster. Besides, like, I guess I'll just flip into weaknesses. I think potentially the wing depth is a slight concern. I mean, I think with what Wes Miller did to try to add more offense, more shooting, I think he did it at the expense of, losing some wing versatility and wing depth. Like Sean Abayev is more offensive minded. Jalen Celestine's really not a great defender, and Jordi Rodriguez just isn't a good athlete. So the depth pieces that you're getting aren't fantastic, obviously. And there's no real like actual wing in the starting lineup. Like Day Thomas, Kriisa, and Harris are probably all guards. Harris can play up and guard a 3 at times, but overall it just looks like guards and bigs on this roster. And like guys like Miller and Cham can obviously guard in space. So I think ultimately they're going to be fine. It's just more of a small concern. Like they don't have the Dan Skillings, Dylan Mitchell, or like a John Newman from a few years back. They don't have that archetype on this roster from a versatility standpoint, from a size standpoint on the wing. So I think that's just a small concern, but overall, I do think this is going to be a good defense across the board.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Torvik projects them as the 17th best adjusted defense. Obviously, that's all just based on projection right now, but I do think it shapes up to be a pretty good defensive group. But I think the wing depth is definitely a fair concern. Now, turning to individual superlatives here, MVP, X Factor for the Cincinnati team. Who do you have?
My MVP was actually Mustafa Cham. I just think he has so much upside on both ends of the floor. He's already proven to be a great defender, and there's obviously there's more offense in the tank. I think there's a little bit more in there as a shooter. I think he's going to be a good role man. I don't think it's like a real like short role creator by any means, but what he can provide on the offensive glass and as a role man in general. And there's a little bit of creation in like the mid post, operating a little bit when he phases up. So I do think he can ultimately reach his ceiling this year. He improved throughout last year, and there's just no other great candidates. Like I can't give this to Day Thomas due to his inefficiencies. He might have some of the best counting stats, but I don't think the efficiency is really going to be there. Could give it to Jalen Haynes as well, who actually I ultimately have as the X factor on this team. I think his post up ability, and he's proven to be like somewhat of a post hub throughout his career, particularly at George Mason. He was a little bit volatile, but overall they ran a lot of offense through him, and he's a wide body guy that can get to the free throw line. He showed real passing instincts and real talent there. Like there's a lot of times where he was double teamed and made some super impressive cross court skip passes. When two guys guard the ball, but obviously there was some volatility there. He threw it away a decent amount, but overall, I think if he can put everything together as a post hub, I think he can be a really good player in the Big 12.
Yeah, no, I like that. I went with the same MVP actually. I went Mustafa Cham. Especially after Jizzle James got dismissed, I think he makes a lot of sense, especially with his impact he's going to have on the defensive end, his versatility overall. And I think his upside, like you mentioned, as a shooter, I think that there's something there, right? Last year was 29% on 79 attempts. So not like it's small volume, but like for a 7'2" big man, it's not all that small. So I think there is something there. And then for X Factor, I kind of just lumped all these guys together. I said the whole guard group, actually. Their efficiency and their ability to take care of the basketball, I think, particularly in the half court, is going to determine what this team can really be. So I think it'll remain to be seen. after losing Jizzle James. But yeah, then I guess now turning to ceiling and floor, bold prediction for this team. Where do you see them?
Yeah, I think they can get to potentially sixth in the Big 12. I think the bottom half of the Big 12 is pretty weak. So, and I think they can sort of separate themselves from that area this year. I don't see them sliding to like 11th or 12th like they did last year. I actually don't remember where they finished, but they had a really rough start to conference play. And yeah, I still think getting to sixth is fairly realistic because I think the defense is going to be good. There's some upside in the front court. So I can't really see them cracking into the top five with how good the top of this league is. But floor, I would say somewhere in the middle of the pack, maybe 10th or 11th. I think there's a pretty narrow range of outcomes for this team that has a good defense, has good athletes, and this is a make or break year for Wes Miller overall. So I think he's going to be willing to make some more changes if he has to tap into the offensive side of the ball a little bit more. I think there will come a point where he will, and he has some guys on the roster that are capable of knocking down shots at least this season. And bold prediction, I would say I think Mustafa Cham can be like an all Big 12 player, and there's potential for him to rise up, the NBA draft boards, maybe get himself into the first round if he can knock down threes at like a 33-34% clip. I think NBA scouts are going to be super excited because the defensive traits are already there. He can defend in space, he can protect the rim at a high level, and you can tell that he's a really good functional athlete for being 7'2". And I do think NBA teams kind of ooze over that stuff. So I do think there's some real upside for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Standing at 7'2", there's a lot of upside there, especially with floor spacing upside. So for me, I kind of felt pretty similar. I said seventh was the ceiling. I feel like it's a very narrow range. I think the defense is solid enough, where like 7 to 10 is kind of where I saw it. I don't really see them varying too much from that window. As for bold prediction, I kind of went on the defensive end. I think this defense per Torvik can be the third best defense in the Big 12. I think there's a lot of good defenses in this league, right? And I think like Torvik has them right now, fifth or sixth. But I think this team can be the third best defense. Of course, like Houston's, I don't really see a world where they're not at the top. But I think they're going to have to hang their hat more on this end if they want to be successful. So that's kind of where I could see them ending up.
Yeah. Personally, I think that'll be tough to do, which I guess, hey, that's
Yeah.
why this is the bold prediction section, because I do think this conference has three of the top, maybe even four defenses in the country, and Houston, Iowa State, and Kansas, who I'm super high on. I would probably have Cincinnati as like the fifth best defense.
Yeah.
But so I do think it's realistic. Like obviously Iowa State and Houston have super high floors with their schemes, and obviously the ceiling's there if they're number 1 and 2 and just ridiculous defenders across that roster. But Cincinnati's really not that far behind.
No. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with the Bearcats, but we'll wrap things up here, and we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.